overall, do you think Vince Russo has done more harm or good for wrestling? How is that even a fucking question? How is that even a question you would need to think for more than 5 seconds about? Obviously, the answer is way more harm. I mean, look at all the ideas of his that were apparently good that had to be filtered and reworked and tweaked and tantalized and moved around and reshaped and everything to be good, to be serviceable for television, to draw big ratings, thanks to Vince McMahon, the only Vince that ever mattered in professional wrestling. Vince Russo, he ain't even worthy of being called Vince as far as wrestling goes, because Vince McMahon, for all his very, very, very terrible things, did a lot of great shit for wrestling. What did Vince Russo do? What did he do? Take a look at the shit he did in WWF. Yes, granted, big ratings, and they couldn't follow up on the goddamn shit, but Vince McMahon knew what the fuck he was doing. Vince Russo goes to WCW, and he is basically exposed as not even being the court jester. He is being exposed as the fucking boot shiner of the court jester. Maybe not even the boot shiner, the one that scrapes the dog shit off the court jester's boots and has to tell the boot shiner, hey, we need to clean this dog shit off of there, bro. We need to do this, bro. Vince Russo is one of the biggest cancers that has ever plagued professional wrestling. Now, yes, a lot of terrible goddamn people in professional wrestling, but for this guy to make it seem like he ever meant anything positive for professional wrestling, like he was ever anything goddamn good, no. This guy is somebody that if he left this earth tomorrow, his kids could grow up better, his wife could get the fuck away from whatever the fuck Vince Russo actually is. This man contradicts himself so goddamn often. It's astonishing. It is goddamn astonishing. You could listen to Vince Russo for 15 fucking seconds. I somehow managed to listen to him multiple times on this show, and he contradicts himself within sometimes the same paragraph. That's a real talent, bro. I'm John Renton with my review, Dark Side of the Ring, Bash at the Beach 2000. Whew. Boy. A lot of bullshit artists on this show. And Lance Storm. Lance Storm was a really good talking head here. He's probably one of the only people that could kind of, not even play both sides, but just offer something where, like, I don't know what the hell was going on. They couldn't even get Hogan for that. I mean, they got Hogan, as far as audio and everything. They got, him to talk about that stuff, but that was it. I would have rather heard Hogan try to bullshit his way out of all the stuff that he was doing, because nobody, not even Jarrett, came out looking good after Bash at the Beach 2000. If you really want to dive into just how maddening the last year of WCW was, go back to my old school wrestling reviews and documentary reviews playlist. I watched it from the reboot episode, which was really, really bad, all the way to the end. The pay-per-views and everything. And let me tell you right now that Vince Russo ever being allowed near being head of creative of any wrestling promotion, this goes to TNA, the man never had any good ideas. Yes, keep the show moving. That's a good idea. Keep people interested. That's a good idea. It's not wholly original as far as television, but he makes it seem like he's so grandiose, and he's been in wrestling since 1991 for 32 years. He has stated multiple goddamn times that he hates the wrestling business. He hasn't been involved in it. And he's barely been involved over the last... When was the last time he was involved in TNA, Impact Wrestling? 2014? That got them kicked off of Spike because Spike didn't want anything to do with them. They went to Destination America. Remember Destination America? Boy, good job, Vinny Russo. You managed to get that company kicked off of the only network that has ever gotten them big ratings. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Vince Russo, just in case you can't tell. I mean, I will not say that he killed WCW, but I will say that that was a perfect example of this stupid, brain parasite, CTE-ridden. I don't even actually know if you can get CTE despite being born without a brain. I mean, he doesn't have an attached brain stem. But this man who thinks he has such great ideas and all this, and he makes himself the victim, like, oh, I was the victim of this and this and this. His mother should have never given birth to him. Should have held him in until he calcified. WCW 2000, what are you like? What are you like? Jeff Jarrett called it one of the biggest disasters, in his entire career. This is coming from a guy that wouldn't put Monty Brown over, by the way. That wouldn't do a lot of stuff. God, Monty Brown was really gifted. It's a damn shame he had to leave, but it was a good job that he did because he took care of family. So, who was more the bullshit artist? I mean, Eric honestly tends to be forgetful conveniently. I side with Eric here, though, because even though Hogan and Eric are in lockstep, almost scissoring together like the two lasses from Blue is the Warmest Color, and with about the same amount of backstage bullshit as far as behind the camera stuff that movie had and WCW had, I despise the wrestling business, bro. I despise the people in it. Now, that more on that here in a bit, but you cannot be a good person and exist in the wrestling business. Bryan Danielson, Mick Foley, and others. Kofi Kingston, I haven't really heard anything bad about. I've heard there are some pretty good goddamn people in wrestling. You can't, bro, because you enter a Shark Tank. And if you don't become a shark, they will eat you alive. That motherfucker would be scared of a goddamn person in a shark costume. I could beat his ass, and I can't even fight. That guy who thought he was such a great character and a wrestler and everything and that kind of stuff, and got speared through a goddamn cage, and unfortunately still had his head attached. Yeah, I don't know if this is coming across, but I'm not a big fan of Vince Russo here. I'm really not. And I get why they had him for this episode. I will be perfectly honest, this episode really didn't tell anything new. If you knew a lot of the stuff from other documentaries and shoot interviews and stuff like that, and watch the goddamn product, nothing about, I mean, there's a little bit of tidbit about how much Vince McMahon bought WCW for. Meltzer wasn't a bad talking head here, which is kind of funny to say. But, yeah, Russo's been in the wrestling business since 1991. He ran a video store, he did the magazine, and despite having no talent to write, have you seen any of his leaked scripts, of his writing? I've seen stuff that he has written. It's impossible to decipher. It's like an alien language. But then Meltzer was asked, do you think Vince Russo has done more harm or good for wrestling? Harm. Harm is the clear fucking answer. So anyway, Meltzer mentions Monday Night Wars. We hear about how WCW started to gain steam and gain popularity because of the roster and because of Bischoff's vision. He says, I'm the first one to create a weekly live TV format for professional wrestling. The fuck you were, Eric. Jerry Jarrett? Now, on a nationwide stage? Sure. Jerry Jarrett? I know Mid-South wasn't always live. They bicycled their tape around. But to the Memphis audience, I believe Memphis wrestling was live. I don't know if it was live every single week. I'm sure there were preemptions and there were times that maybe things were taped in advance for some reason. But I believe Jerry Jarrett beat Eric Bischoff by a number of fucking years. But that's okay. Bischoff just conveniently forgets that. He's also a crackpot as far as his belief, but I love him as a heel character. He is tremendous and really does know some stuff. He knows about the performative side of professional wrestling and about the television side. He doesn't really know how to put a show together as far as the wrestling. You would think somebody that worked with Vern Gagne and the AWA and saw how people operate in WCW would have figured out how to do things, but he was just really flying by the seat of his pants. And the cartoonish stuff in WCW Oz, that was another miss by Dusty Rhodes. Rest in peace, Dusty Rhodes. Vader should have been used better. The Shockmaster, another Dusty idea. Uncle Fred, poor Uncle Fred. And Hogan got signed to WCW in 1994. They ignored the fact that, of course, even though it was a big money deal, and Eric had cut a lot of costs, I will give him that much credit, moved it to Disney MGM Studios, and they were doing their pay-per-views in some decent-sized buildings, and they were building up some stuff. Bash at the Beach 94 was a success. But then look at 1994 Starrcade. Look at that. He's facing his best friend, the Butcher. He's butchered the friendship. Brutus the Barber Beefcake. Without his wife, Betty the Barber Queefcake. But nevertheless, Hogan was so over and everything, ignoring the fact that by mid to later 95, they were booing the fuck out of him. They were really booing the fuck out of him. The Doomsday Cage, the Alliance to End Hulkamania, the 3-tier cage match where they brought back Zeus. They called him Z Gangster. Rest in peace, Tiny Lister. Apparently really nice guy. Never met him. Never met him. People that met him at conventions, though, or met him at signings, said he was a super nice guy. And a guy that they called the Final Solution. No, really, that is what they called him. And then they had to change it to the Ultimate Solution. That's not any better. But, Hall and Nash got signed in 1996, and that's where the light went off to create the NWO that he took from Japan, which he admitted in the NWO biography that WWE and A&E did. Then again, we're trying to focus on Bash at the Beach. That's why we spent about the first, 15 or so minutes talking about everything else, but they had to set the scene. There's my reality. The ratings took off. And don't get me wrong, the ratings did take off. I enjoyed WCW programming a lot more than WWF at that time. I got to where I was watching Nitro live, and I was taping Raw. And Russo came up with all the WWF stuff. Sure he did. Sure he came up with all the best stuff, Russo. That's why Terry Reynolds had a goddamn miscarriage. No mention of Ed Ferrara, that noted piece of shit that made fun of JR's Bell's palsy, and I hope has the worst goddamn rest of his life possible. That's what he deserves. He deserved to be spat on and treated like a piece of shit, and he deserves to be kicked around like dog shit. Yeah, Ed Ferrara's a fucking moron. An attempt at wrestling or whatever failed miserably, and he's a horrible writer and a horrible person. So fuck Ed Ferrara, and fuck his mother for giving birth to him. So, Crash TV. We gotta throw the wrestling handbook out the window, Vince. I guarantee you that Russo said maybe 10% of the stuff that he said to Vince. Because, yeah, what did he have to lose? What did Vince McMahon have to lose? Well, his company. And had this stuff not worked, it would have basically bankrupted. Now, thankfully, they leaned into Howard Stern, Jerry Springer, all that stuff and everything. And they got Mike Tyson. That was a big deal. I guarantee goddamn you, Russo had nothing to do with that. That was Vince and people in Vince's inner circle saying, God, it's like, you got to get him. Maybe Austin's like, God damn, you got to get him, pal. Then he hit his wife because Austin liked to do that. So, the idea of Crash TV, to get a fan to basically, not want to change the channel. So just short matches, ADHD, And yes, they even held that over into 2001, into the invasion angle. And sure, there was a frenetic energy to it. And there were some shows that hold up, but if you look at a lot of Raw and definitely the Raws, because by the time they got to SmackDown, Russo was almost out of it. In fact, that's actually where, the next part comes in. It's not like Russo was exactly the sole reason the WWF took off. Again, I'm not saying that the idea of ramping things up and being more adult wasn't, something that Vince McMahon needed to do, but it's not like Russo was ever able to, interweave storyline. He never came up with any good goddamn storylines. Vince McMahon had to, take him around and instead of going from here to here, in an instant, Vince McMahon would have to, just try to weave out the storyline. Vince Russo wanted, after Kane had made his debut, wanted Undertaker to come out and chokeslam him through the announcer's table the next week or 2 weeks after that. And Vince McMahon wanted to build it to WrestleMania. And thank God, sensible logic, which is not a phrase I often apply to Vince McMahon, actually took over. Bischoff was fired just before Fall Brawl 1999, and then Russo left because of SmackDown. He wasn't going to get a raise, and he did it because of family. He wanted to move his wife closer so she could be around her family, and they could get help with the kids. Vince McMahon said, have a nanny. You don't tell a proud Italian man who loves his family to get a nanny. You motherfucker, you wouldn't know anything about being a goddamn man anyway. Work, and if you have to, do that. Now, if you want to go home and be a family man, as Guile once said, go ahead and do that. But don't be in the goddamn wrestling business and think that you're not going to be on the road a whole lot, especially when he's getting paid a lot more money than anybody of his talent and skill level ever should have gotten. So, I went in WCW with a target on my back. Yeah, it's a shame they all missed, Vince. So, anyway, from day one, Hulk and Eric were like this. Eric was out of the company for like 6-7 months. I think he was brought back in like March of 2000. Still the whole point, he was gone for like 6 months. Hogan, after Halloween Havoc, I don't think Hogan was on the program until sometime in late January, early February. He was barely on. After the WCW title flummox between him and Sting, he was off. I mean, he might have made a few appearances. He was either making a movie, I think he had a failed presidential thing, brother. But the whole point is, Hogan wasn't making a lot of appearances anyway, because Hogan wasn't drawing shit. Vince Russo wanted to get rid of Hogan. He read mistrust in Hogan. And that Russo wanted to get rid of others and Hogan. Older people. And philosophically, I don't disagree with trying to reintroduce new. That's something WCW probably should have started to do in 97. Because they ruined the whole thing with Sting at Starrcade 97. DDP finally became champion in 99. Booker T became champion in 2000. More on that later. They were spinning their goddamn wheels because they got complacent. Had they brought Bret Hart, I'm just going to go with this real quick and I'll get back to the episode. Had they brought Bret Hart out right after, the night after Survivor Series 97, Bret, we know that you got this. We know that you have, we know that you are torn up and everything. We're giving you a lot of money. We will give you an extra $100,000. We will fly you here. Here's a mic, 10 minutes, say whatever. 10 million people will watch that. Maybe I'm saying this as a massive Bret Hart fan, but nevertheless, WCW was in dire straits. It was the walk of life, and they were walking that plank. The old footage, boy, what a mess. No mention of Kevin Sullivan taking over creative for a bit, by the way. Flair being buried in the desert. Mud matches. I believe it was Roddy Piper on Rhonda Singh, the former Bertha Faye. She had a tragic end to her life. Filthy Animals, more adult. 7, Dustin Rhodes. Look at this crap I'm wearing. I look like Uncle Fester. Russo removed from power after 3 months. Oh, the ratings went up. I'm not saying the ratings didn't incrementally go up. They couldn't have gone much further down. They were drawing 3.3 compared to like 6s that WWF was getting at that point. And the ratings, even after the Finger Book of Doom, the ratings, at least until about Spring Stampede or Slamboree, at least Spring Stampede, yeah, WCW was losing ground, but they were still there. And then by, I think it might have actually been more around June of 98 or June 99, boom, they just hit the goddamn, because turmoil and all this shit. So Bischoff was brought back to oversee Russo, and that jives with everything else that was told. Jarrett said you have a philosophical difference, not necessarily an idea difference. I mean, you have a philosophical difference. Here's Lance Storm. He preferred to deal with Eric. That Russo wanted Storm to be Eric's illegitimate son. And Lance even said, he's like 10 years older than me. How could he be my dad? Lance Storm really should have been made the WCW World Heavyweight Champion, along with having the Hardcore, the Cruiserweight, and the U.S. title. Make him a 4-belt guy. Even if it was just for a month, it would have been great. And people are like, oh, but Booker T by that point, as great as Booker T was, not as a commentator on NXT, as great as Booker T was, and as cool as it was, tell me that Lance Storm taking that away, and then Booker holding that again, holding the title again, and vanquishing Lance Storm, hey, that would have elevated both guys. They're also tossing the goddamn title around anyway, like, a dirty blonde at a sorority party, so nevertheless. And WCW's New Blood versus Millionaires Club storyline. Let me tell you right now, as somebody that watched that live and rewatched it, it was dog shit. They had Shane Douglas in the fucking New Blood. Shane Douglas, who was barely able to even get out of his bed at that point. And Marcus Bagwell, who had been in WCW for 9 years. Or going on 9 years. It was a mess. No mention of the Hogan-Kidman feud. That was terrible. The blood of the New Blood pouring down, because Russo got that idea, took it from when the Brood did it. Except the Brood, despite not lasting long, were pretty over. Nobody got over with the blood stuff. Even Nash is like watching the blood's falling. I'm not standing there and, let's go drink, Scott. Oh, wait, Scott was gone from the cup. Rest in peace, Scott Hall. God, that was so terrible. I'm glad he got clean. It's just so terrible. But yeah, the blood falling down, it was terrible. Everyone was frustrated, which I don't really blame anybody for being frustrated at that point. The creative staff just before Bash at the Beach were like, Russo's like asking who should be the champion, and they're like, put the belt on Booker T. Now, whether that mean actually happened or not, Booker T was highly respected by many in WCW, I imagine. I mean, he was part of one of the greatest tag teams of all time. Arguably the greatest tag team in WCW history? Top 5? I think Harlem Heat's top 5. As great as the Steiners were, think about how long the Steiners were in WCW. Harlem Heat were there from 93. Okay, so Harlem Heat would be top 5, but still, Harlem Heat, Steiners, Midnight Express, Rock and Roll. I mean, if we're talking NWA stuff back in Jim Crockett, we're a lot of great tag team. Harlem Heat's up there. They are one of the best. But Jarrett's chosen one thing, face all these legends, beat all these legends. They show like a brief clip of David Arquette as WCW champion. He didn't want to be WCW champion. He wanted to, he did donate his winnings to the families of various wrestlers that passed away. Unfortunately, one of them was Melanie Pillman, who proceeded to piss away all that goddamn money, and I'm just going to say I'm glad she's dead because she didn't deserve any happiness in her life with how she treated her children. And yeah, I'm just targeting everybody here because I'm a wrestling fan that's just tired of just seeing good people treated badly. So, Hogan's creative control that Hogan claimed in a WCW biography he had never used, he had never exercised. You fucking bald-faced liar. You daughter-desiring fuck. No, I ain't talking about the disgraced, indicted former president. Same skin tone, though. So, Eric, Russo, and Hogan were in a trailer discussing stuff, and Russo claims all the stuff was decided and everything, that he wrote the first script, Hogan didn't like it, and Hogan liked the second script, and the idea was that Hogan wasn't going to be the champion, but he was going to look like Superman and beat everybody and everything and all that stuff. Well, Eric tells a different story, basically, that the idea was, use this in a storyline, Hogan leaves in disgust with the belt, and then a new champion is crowned during the show. Hogan then comes back at Halloween Havoc, or no, actually a new champion would be crowned in a tournament, and then they would build up to Halloween Havoc, and then Hogan would show up and say, you gotta face me. Now, Hogan as champion in 2000 was stupid. Also, I do have one question. If they were to vacate the title, Bash at the Beach 2000 happened on, I believe, July 9th. July 9th or July 11th of 2000. Somewhere around that. Halloween Havoc was at the end of October of 2000. They were going, in the state that they were in, they were going to do a tournament for how long? They were going to do a tournament when? They were going to have was it going to be a 128 person tournament? Was it going to be bigger than the Mayhem tournament? That's the part I don't understand. Yeah, maybe have a tournament and everything, but okay, you're gonna, whatever. God damn it. That's the part I don't understand. When were they going to do the tournament? How were they going to do the tournament? And how was it going to go for 3.5 months? So, Russo says, bro, I'm not an idiot. Yes, you are, you fucking moron. Just lay down. Make it a shoot. And Jarrett lays down and, does all that stuff. But first, he says, Vince, I don't think the storyline is well thought out. Jarrett's thinking, do I really want to be part of this? I will say this is where Jarrett comes off good, because he talks about the respect that his family instilled in him, the respect his family had in professional wrestling, from Christine Jarrett to his dad, to him, and that, he didn't want to do it. His music played for a goddamn minute. He wasn't happy with Hogan. I don't blame him. At the same time, though, Hogan, Jarrett, did anybody really want to see Jarrett as champion? And this is even being generous, because he break 6,000 guitars and never drew a dime. But everyone was just all upset because Russo decided to go off script. See, everybody, Bischoff and Hogan seemed happy they left. They're celebrating, all that stuff. It came across great. And then Russo goes, oh, I'm playing politics with Hulk Hogan. And that, Hulk Hogan, when he knew it was bullshit, he beat Jeff Jarrett. And that these are the things people hate me for. People hate you for a lot of things, Russo. Some people hate the mere fact that you still exist, like me. Fans that love wrestling, that hate him. Anyway, that, oh, he's in the moment and this is real. No, it isn't. I hate to use the term mark like this, because all fans are marks. And that's what Russo is, though. He's the worst kind of mark. He believes in his bullshit. And Lance even says, if this was the plan, it's fucking stupid. And he's right. Lance Storm's a great follow on Twitter, by the way. Booker beats Jarrett to close the show. Russo knew that Hogan wouldn't like the shoot. And then Eric knew that Hogan was mad because he got really, really goddamn quiet. Bischoff blows off Russo's claims and everything and all that stuff. That, oh, but did you know that Hogan was going to pursue legal action? How could I not? Jarrett didn't know why Hogan sued. The Georgia Appeals Court threw it out because it's fictional characters can't actually be liable for anything like that. But WCW settled with Hogan. Bischoff didn't know exactly how much it was, but it had to at least been 7 figures. Makes sense. Eric then lays into Meltzer a bit. And don't get me wrong, Meltzer is a fucking idiot. I mean, he truly fucking is. The man questioned Roman Reigns' leukemia. The man said they took Shibata's brain out to, fix it. And then gave him a new brain with blackjack and hookers. But it was doomed for failure from the very beginning, much like Vince Russo's life, and the fact that his mother again should have held him in and had him calcified. And then Vince again buys WCW for apparently $4.2 million. I think it was like $2.5 million for the rings and other stuff and whatever, and then $1.7 for the tape library. $4.2 million. Goddamn, if somebody in Washington State had won the goddamn lottery at the time, they could have bought it. So, Eric says, I try not to carry any baggage. Eric Bischoff, who has gone on record calling Bret Hart boring, saying Bret Hart had no fire, no passion. And Eric Bischoff, who's known not for necessarily pushing the best goddamn people and not understanding how the wrestling business actually works. But he doesn't carry any baggage. And Russo, he said he despises anybody, despises the people in wrestling, but he doesn't despise any of these people. That's what he says at the end. So he contradicts himself in the same goddamn program. I'm going to say this as somebody that just absolutely despises Vince Russo's existence, that I hope, I honest to God hope, that any wrestling fan that ever liked his ideas remembers that they were filtered through Vince McMahon, who has many, many faults, and Vince McMahon himself will burn in the absolute worst pit of hell for all the shit he did and all the women he assaulted and all the bad shit that he did. But Vince McMahon was a net positive for professional wrestling. Maybe not behind the scenes, but as far as taking the business worldwide. What did Vince Russo do? He tried to kill it. Because he doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. He's never known what the fuck he's doing. And as far as I'm concerned, Vince Russo is literally just a shit stain. Yeah, I'm going to work that in there. Because he's a shit stain in the underwear of life. He's one that you can't get rid of. That's all he is. So yeah, Bash at the Beach 2000 next week. Mario Giannetti. Boy, that's going to be fun. Bash at the Beach 2000. Hooray! So agree, disagree, what I said, like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Renthlan. I'll see you soon.